Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to a special debrief edition of Politics at Sam and Anne's, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know about Kemi Badenoch's speech in about 20 minutes. I'm Anne McElvoy at Tory Conference here in Manchester, and today Badenoch took to the stage with a message that she and no one else was in charge of the Conservative Party, and she pledged to abolish stamp duty altogether if she becomes Prime Minister.
It was quite the moment, reminiscent of David Cameron's opposition promise to abolish inheritance tax, which saved his leadership nearly 2 decades ago. Let's see if it works for her as well. Watching from Mumbai on Sky News on an iPad, of course, where I'm travelling with the Prime Minister, I saw a Tory leader give a nearly hour-long speech which projected strength and was long on humour and long on values. I am an engineer, not an arsonist, she declared, as she insisted she leads the only party that can be responsible with the public purse. And judging by the reaction of the shadow cabinet and delegates in the room, it left those in the hall outwardly pretty giddy.
My impression, Sam, there was some anxiety. I was in the hall as she started her speech. But absolutely, as you say, she got her confidence. The crowd was starting to sort of whoop and shout along more at one point, which is a lot better than the opposite if you're giving a speech. Yes, it was a true religion. It was common sense. It was a small state. But the bigger question I think she was framing here is, what does it mean to be a Conservative in the era of the challenge from reform? That's why you had that joke, I'm not an arsonist, guess who she is implying is, but taking the fight also to Rachel Reeves and to Labour and that focus on the economy. Big shift, isn't it, from just months ago when Kemi Badenoch was telling us all it was going to take years to come up with a comprehensive offer. She was going to wait and see, do lots of analysis, etc. Time was running out on her. She picked up pace today.
It was also a speech, Anne, which showed, I thought, that she's pretty at home at the podium. Much better, much more comfortable there than, for instance, in a TV interview, that they can get quite scrappy. But she looked like she had actually mastered the build, the stories, the lists, the reveal, the peroration, all of that. She was kind of in her element, I thought, behind that big podium, and the smile on her face. Particularly as she greeted her husband Hamish after the speech, had concluded to suggest she knew that she had done a good job by the kind of the terms which she set herself.
She's very like a professional sort of sports person when she prepares her speeches. I just happened to take a look at the way she was doing that, and absolutely, Hamish Badenoch, her husband, is in there, a bit like one of those partner coach sort of vibes between them. So he basically steadies her and then off she goes. And as you say, I think this time it worked. Let's not forget that one of the reasons she's leader in the first place was that when she came out of pretty much out of nowhere and had her first go at the leadership, her practice run, everyone said, wow, isn't she actually good at presenting? And I think she'd sort of lost that edge, and she got some of that mojo back today. But she also did need to bring some substance. So let's start with that announcement, the stamp duty rabbit from the hat. It was briefed in advance, but there was one bit that was marked as redacted, which of course made us all the more curious. And here was that section.
So I have looked at the stamp duty thresholds to see where we can change them. I have looked at the rates you have to pay to see if we can lower them. I have decided that we can't, because that simply wouldn't be enough. Conference, the next Conservative government will abolish stamp duty on your home.
So here is a policy that free market think tanks, particularly the IEA, have been pressing on Kemi Badenoch. It's obviously one targeted on homeowners, prospective homeowners, relatively prosperous people. And yes, it's an annoying tax. Yes, a lot of people complain about it. Exemptions are complex, fiddly, as Angela Rayner just discovered, the outgone. I doubt she'd have been cheering, but you can see this case for simplification. It's a talking point in a certain group of people, and you can argue it's a sizable barrier to downsizing for older people and also people moving around the country for jobs, which was something that she wanted to highlight, or if you've got a growing family. The question I might ask is, yes, stamp duty is a talking point if you are in that demographic, but a lot of people don't move house very often in their lives. Their bigger concern is probably getting themselves or their children onto the housing ladder in the first place. So is there enough cut through to enough people to really make you think, oh, that was the big Conservative moment. Let me think about going back to the Conservatives or voting for them for the first time.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating to watch how the politics kind of shakes down. It might end up being one of those changes that Labour are quite happy to oppose. Um, One person immediately after the speech from Labour, this isn't Labour High Command, this isn't Labour government person, but just a kind of a thinker in the Labour Party, said that was a mad speech because the more valuable your home, the bigger your tax bake. So you can see how dividing lines might shake down on that. Now, I think the dream of the Conservatives would be if, come the November budget, changes to stamp duty, increases in stamp duty are actually on the table there, and then the gap widens, and that allows them to point to an even bigger difference between them and the Labour Party in this. So I think, it is interesting to see where Rachel Reeves might go in November in relation to what Kemi Badenoch has done today, not least because there have already been rumours, and that's already moved and to some extent gummed up the property market. Now, you mentioned cost and analysis. We've had some details about it from Conservative High Command, and there is one absolute. Actually, to me, it's a jaw dropper of a kind of qualification for this policy, right? So this will apply irrespective of the purchase price for primary residences. I don't think we ever expected it to be anything other than primary residences, and it won't apply. So it won't apply to additional properties or to non-UK residents. But it will not apply to Scotland and Wales because, of course, stamp duty does not exist in Scotland and Wales, and it is up to the devolved administrations there to decide whether or not to replicate a cut to the kind of similar type of property taxation that they have in both of those devolved nations. And that is why this version of abolishing stamp duty, which is now, as we know, England alone, actually only costs £4.5 billion, according to the Conservative Party. But I do wonder, as we head into very big devolved elections next year, Wales, the Senate is on the table. You've got Scotland as well, Scottish Parliament going to the polls. To have your flagship policy being England only at this stage is interesting and perhaps a bit of a complication. Now, the bigger point is that I feel like the Tory party have actually said in big picture terms that they're going to be the party of fiscal responsibility, but they have spent a lot of money this week. I just want to play you, Anne, a bit of Kemi Badenoch's speech, which sort of distilled the central argument.
A weak economy makes us poorer. The services we rely on get worse, and people cannot build a better life for themselves or their families. Weak borders allow people to exploit our generosity, put our housing and public services under pressure, and fracture our sense of who we are as a nation. A weak economy and weak borders means steady decline. I reject that fate.
Really interesting to me is how, as a leader, absolutely fighting, we know that Kemi Badenoch was fighting in the trenches for her leadership here at this conference. How do you avoid getting into, do you remember Donald Trump and the American carnage kind of speech time when he first came in as president? I don't think that would work here in this context. Conservative Party, as you saw by the week, they still like to be up and at it. They like to be out and about. They don't want to hear that everything is about decline. It's beyond repair. And I think she had to walk a line in this speech when she said she wouldn't accept this narrative of steady decline. What she wants to pin on Labour is that it has not got a recipe to deal with this sense, not that the country's the worst place in the world, the kind of Elon Musk sort of narrative about the UK to an extent reform attach themselves to that, but that there's not much hope and it's all terrible. So I felt what she had to do there was not be too gloomy. At the same time, she was bringing really difficult things to the table. She was comparing Britain with emerging economies, notably Poland, and she's saying, we're just falling way behind other competitors. And, we need to get real, but we need to get real with an eye on something that Conservatives can get behind, and we hope will persuade others too.
I was also struck by that the section of the speech that mentioned Poland. Let's just play that.
We are competing with economic success stories like Poland. 15 years ago, Polish workers came here to find opportunity. Now, Poland is growing twice as fast as we are. While Britain was redefining what a woman is, China was building 5 nuclear reactors.
For me, the political strategy here is fascinating, and what that section does is, I think it taps into some of the what's called the YIMBY crowd. Now, we're all familiar with NIMBYs, people who say no to everything. There is a growing kind of emerging sense that there's a battle to be had over those people that oppose everything, and that's led by this group called the YIMBYs, who just want to get growth going, and they point to countries like Poland, once supplying us with large chunks of the labour market. Now the economy is motoring ahead and asking why we can't do it. And I can feel Kemi Badenoch kind of edging towards the YIMBY argument, which could be quite politically fruitful. It's optimistic and it's interesting territory. Indeed, there are some prominent YIMBY figures at Tory conference, including Lawrence Newport from the Looking for Growth group. The other bit of political strategy that's fascinating is that this is the first conference speech that we have seen, Anne, that didn't have Nigel Farage as the prominent protagonist in the drama of the leader's speech. And it seems to me very concerted. And the reason I think I know it's a concerted decision was from all the shadow cabinet comments afterwards. So Robert Jenrick popped up on Sky and told Arbeth Rigby, we are not threatened by reform. We want to be better than reform. Victoria Atkins said afterwards, reform are just another political party. Now, of course, if we could go back in time to Liverpool and the Labour Party, Keir Starmer is making Nigel Farage the principal opponent about which he wanted to talk a lot. Ed Davey did the same. It is a very sharp difference. There are clearly benefits to marginalising reform and just not talking about them. Maybe this will be very successful for the Tory party. But I've also got this small question. When it comes to reform and when it comes to Nigel Farage, is the Tory party just a little bit squeamish about directly attacking them by name?
If we look at whether they wanted to get past the R word, then yes, absolutely. And one of the ways to do that this has been quite strategic, and actually the strategy work seems to be rather better than anything we've seen before on Team Badenoch, frankly, which is take the fight to reform and at the same time consolidate Kemi Badenoch's position, shore her up against challenges. It's often quite hard to do. It sounds easy, it's quite hard to do 2 things at once when you have one big moment as leader. And as we reflected at the top of the podcast, Sam, just in real time, I got this text in from someone who'd be very senior on the Cameron Osborne team saying, doesn't it remind you of Osborne's inheritance tax cut announcement 2011, which was a game changer in that it basically intimidated Gordon Brown, put him off calling a snap election, which who knows, he might even have won. He said, different landscape now, same tactics. But you do sense there that at least a bit of thinking has gone into that kind of timing. Is it good against reform because it's part of an economic message? Let's see. But definitely, is it good for Kemi Badenoch saying, I'm in charge now? She kept coming back to that. I think that was the message we were intended to take away.
And I think there was one more message. The person who was actually attacked more than any other, and again, I think this is smart given, potentially politically smart given where politics is inevitably going to go, was Rachel Reeves. She was, in some senses, the villain of Kemi Badenoch's speech. She's got the budget in November where she has to find 20 to 30 billion pounds, probably all through tax rises. That's a massive moment for the Tories as well, because they've got to be the recipient of any kind of flow away from the Labour Party in terms of support that they would hope. Let's hear how Kemi Badenoch talks about Rachel Reeves.
Rachel Reeves likes to congratulate herself for breaking the glass ceiling. What she's really broken is our economy. Attacking those who work hard, destroying business confidence, forcing wealth creators to leave the country, piling debt onto our children. We know that in her November budget of doom, she will give us all something to cry about.
So I can see the pitch rolling ahead of the budget, but, let's see if Kemi Badenoch decides that she is the person that needs to take on Rachel Reeves week after week after week before November the 26th. I think that is that positioning would be quite an interesting battle. So I think it's time now. We've heard the speech, we've heard all the speeches, actually. I'm kind of interested in your big picture sort of finale take, Anne. Where does all of this leave the Conservative Party?
I think quite a lot has changed, and even since you went off on your Kia Miles travels and we got towards that grand finale, I think the party generally, the sense here that I've been picking up is that they've rallied much more behind Kemi Badenoch. We haven't maybe reflected it enough, and I just want to say it, that we did see a much more human side of a party leader. This is an area where Kemi Badenoch has often struggled, where Keir Starmer struggles, which is how do you do authentic in an age when everyone is trying to segment their message for social media, for broadcasters, for their base, and not to forget the poor old electorate out there. And I thought what we saw in Kemi Badenoch, even that little Kemi giggle, one thing that I know Kemi Badenoch reasonably well, and there's always been a bit of a disjuncture between if you get to know her and she's relaxed, the way that she's able to engage on things. She can be very funny. She can, she has a bit of self-awareness. And what came across, which could often be seen as tetchy, was often a word that was applied to her. So I think she's tried to square that circle. I think absolutely that close team around her. And I think her husband Hamish is very much, by the way, part of that stabilisation programme, because she has a trust relationship there that she's maybe been lacking in the party. The other thing, Robert Jenrick, you were pursuing him Sam Coates way. I mean, I still listen back to your clip and think it was one of the great sort of doorsteps of this conference. He has been around. He popped into the Politico pub yesterday. He poured me a pint. So clearly he's running. But it doesn't feel like that is moving now. So you're right to say November, a year into her leadership, that is a possible moment. The strategy is to stave that off, isn't it? The strategy is to say she's done enough now to take the fight to Labour, to Rachel Reeves, exactly as you say, in person, on the economy. Why on earth would you blow it all up now? So I think we've seen Robert Jenrick not resigning at all. He's definitely around. He's got his own people. He does his own thing. He's always around by himself, not with other people. But that's the Bobby J way of rolling. One other thought, just to leave you with, Sam. I was talking to someone else who would be a plausible contender for the leadership late last night, shall we say, well refreshed, all of us at a party, and said, "Come on, then, do you think it's possible to change a leader?" And they said, if we subject the public to another election for leader, we will look like a self-interested, inward-looking bunch of, followed by a not very conservative word. And he said he said, if you think that the party could collapse, that is the surest way that this party could collapse. That's what Kemi Badenoch is banking on, that she has bought herself time.
Well, that's the last word on Conservative Party conference. Just a last word for me on the conference season in general. I am struck overall in the parallels between the Labour conference that we saw and the Tory conference that we saw. Both saw leaders under pressure going into it. Both saw leaders deliver well-received speeches that steadied the nerves of the people in the room, the people that they needed to reassure that they were backing the right horse. But some of the fundamentals remain, and politics now goes with such violence and at such speed, nobody can be sure where we will be, particularly after the most important political event of this year, which is on November the 26th with the 20 to 30 billion pound black hole, which could, change everything. Right. The alarm came with me to Mumbai and it's gone off. So we've got to shut up.
Oh, no. I was hoping to just be able to go on because you hadn't taken the alarm clock with you, but there it is.
I can see that Conservative Party conference is being dismantled all around Anne in Manchester. I'm being summoned to meetings connected with the visit here in Mumbai. We will be back tomorrow for Politics at Sam and Anne's 4,500 miles apart from one another, but nevertheless as close as we have ever been. See you then, Anne.
Politics at Sam and Anne goes global. See you tomorrow morning.